Hello, everyone. We now come to the section whereby we share about debtors.
That's right, Francis. We're going to talk about insolvency and other parties, such as debtors and shareholders.
Welcome to this YouTube channel of K-Leaders. I'm Francis Chan.
I'm David Wong.
David, please share with us your topic.
Thanks, Francis. So today we're going to look at the position of debtors and other counterparties in the insolvency process. So the liquidator is now in control of the company. And what that means is that they will be in charge of the process and the direction of the company. For debtors, you are still bound to perform your contracts with the company. But in Hong Kong, the law does recognize what are called ipso facto clauses. They are clauses which say if the company goes into insolvency, then you are freed from your contractual obligation as a counterparty. Also keep in mind that even if you want to enforce your contract against a company in certain situations, the liquidator has the power to disclaim onerous or unprofitable contracts within a 12-month period, which means that the liquidator does not have to perform those types of contracts.
I see. David, I have two questions. First, I understand that maybe in the contract, the debtor has credit terms, so they may be allowed to pay within 30 days, but upon liquidation, understand that they have to repay immediately.
Certainly, if that's what the contract says, and those kind of acceleration clauses are quite common, particularly in credit contracts, which basically means if the company goes into insolvency, the entire amount of the debt is immediately due and payable.
I see. The second question, I think, is a very interesting question for most of my friends in the industry. They always ask me the question, Francis, now the liquidator jumps into my client cases and they ask for the books and records. So what's their rights and entitlement? Must they pass the books to the liquidator? Can they charge for that passing over the books?
Generally, you wouldn't be required to give any documents in your possession to the liquidator. So the liquidator does have a right to those books and records. In terms of the practicalities, they'll generally will agree to make some payment for photocopying charges and other things.
So just photocopying charges. And they have the obligation to pass the books.
That's right.
And then I think it's also the suggestion that they should resign as company secretary ASAP after they realize the company is in liquidation.
Certainly, if you want to protect your position in terms of future fees, you are entitled to resign as a company secretary.
Oh, I see. Thank you.
So now let's look at another interesting issue that arises in insolvency, particularly for debtors, and that's what we call set-off. So imagine a situation where the company owes you some money, but you also owe the company some money. In this case, there is something called insolvency set-off, which applies automatically and is mandatory. And what that means is that your debit balance will be set off against your credit balance, usually leaving just one single balance, which in most cases will be a net credit balance. It doesn't apply, of course, if the creditor had notice of the petition at the time of extending credit. So there are certain exceptions to the rule of insolvency set-off. And a similar rule that often applies or comes up in insolvency is the rule in Cherry and Boltby. And that just basically means anyone who wants to claim on a fund, such as in an insolvency, must also make a contribution to it if they owe money to the fund. While that sounds very simple, it does give rise to a lot of complications in modern day contracts, for instance, in securities or derivative contracts.
Hi, David. I think I have a case to share with you. Back to the days when I were in the insolvency field, I worked for a bank liquidation. And I see a very sympathetic case for staff working in that bank. They place a lot of money on the bank account, so the funds fees when they are in liquidation. And then on the other hand, the liquidator chased them for the home loan repayment. That's
right, Francis. In those kind of situations, their deposits are set off against the amount they owe under their mortgages. And that's an example of insolvency set-off in action.
Yeah, so they are very unfortunate in those cases.
Yes, because it generally leaves, after the set-off, there's generally a net credit balance, which means they still owe money to the bank. All right, so now let's have a look at the position of another group of people in the insolvency process, and they are shareholders. Generally, in an insolvent liquidation, shareholders have no economic interest left in the company because even the claims of creditors are not paid out in full. And as we've discussed, there's a change in the director's duties. So normally a director owes their duty to the shareholders, but in an insolvency process, that duty is then widened to encompass the interests of creditors. So all this means that shareholders have a very limited, if any, role in the liquidation process. And unfortunately, any transfers of shares or changes in the status of members is void once the commencement of the liquidation has begun. If there are, however, unpaid amounts on shares, then the liquidator will call for those unpaid amounts to be paid by the shareholders to the company.
Understand. Hi, David, can you share with us what's the takeaway for this episode?
So for this episode, I think it's important for people to remember that contractual obligations remain intact. If they are owed an amount of money by the company, but they also owe money to the company, then certain rules apply, like set-off. And for shareholders, they are generally left with very little economic interest, so they don't have very much involvement in the liquidation process.
Thank you, David. So what's the topic for next episode?
In the next episode, we're going to look at liquidators' recoveries. These are the kind of actions that liquidators can take to recover monies paid out by the company and other transactions for the benefit of the body of creditors.
Thank you so much for the sharing. And thank you for watching. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for watching this video. If you like it, please give us a like and subscribe and share with your friends. Look forward to your continued support. See you next time. Bye-bye.